Welcome everybody to another Dragon Quest collab video. We're talking about Psaro this time, who is a fire evasion unit, and I'm pretty excited for him. I'm going to be pulling for him on stream on Wednesday, so look forward to that. Somewhere around 7:30 Pacific time. We'll see kind of how that all works out. But we're going to talk about his kit today. We're going to assess whether or not people should be pulling for him. And really, with these non-FF collabs, it is a risk. There's just no way around it. We haven't seen these collabs return for other forms of them. So we really do need to assess whether these units are going to be worth it for the short time before we get the next power up. Let's start off with an AI test for Psaro, and I am borrowing Psaro's from people on JP servers, so I'm limited to whatever else they have equipped. He only has 2 TP skills on his main job, and this is a main job, sub job. Psaro, he doesn't have anything else on. So he has a 25% agility and 25% evasion buff, and then he has a 2 use of courage. So we'll go put him on auto here, and he's gonna go ahead and run, and he's using a TMR ability first. So I actually forgot to check which TMR he had on. So we'll see kind of what goes on from here. We see Slime's going to go ahead and buff him. And here is the agility and evasion buff. It's so powerful because it's for allies and for himself. He's going to go ahead and do some damage because he will always deal damage as a priority, which is good to see. But then once we deal with these 2 units, we should see him go ahead and use his courage skill. And there we have another skill. That was the courage skill there, I believe. Let's just double check that, because I believe it has some stuff attached to it as well. So we can go ahead, pop on over to Psaro here and double check that he's got these skills on. Okay, and I've confirmed, sorry for that this, where I'm clicking down here, that little line there, it is Guts translated from JP. So he has done his Guts buff. It just has some other stuff attached to it as well. That's why it was confusing me when I saw it flash up. So what we saw from Psaro was he used a TMR ability first. He then used his team buff for evasion. He then used his courage. Now, we definitely want the evasion buff and the courage buff on as a priority. Those are the 2 most important things. So we have to be very careful with whatever TMR we give him, considering that those things are musts, and he does have some good mobility in terms of 2 jump on his kit. Next up, we're going to talk about who Psaro is going to be strong against and weak against. And as for strong, I mean, this is a pretty nice matchup here. Obviously, he's going to be strong against ice, but it's more than just the elemental advantage. So he's going to be really strong against snow specifically because he can dispel courage, but also he has his dark matter attack, which is going to be a non-type attack. It's going to go through all of snow's resistances, and if he builds fire resist, it's going to go through that too. And it's also going to decrease his healing power significantly, which means his own healing skill, when you pop his courage, is not going to actually heal him back as much. Or if you might just be killing him because you're breaking the courage. But if you don't break the courage and then maybe a Velis comes in and tries to heal him, then it's not going to heal for as much as well. So it's a really strong skill specifically for dealing with snow. But we do see other healers in the meta right now, like Resnick, like Sylvie, and Lemure is another one that's kind of seeing a little bit of play as well. But besides snow, this is also going to be a good matchup against those ice units because they can't deal with courage in general except for the new Winter Ravies, but they all do have 100% hits. That's the one thing to watch out for all the Ranger subs out there that have the sure hit, and even Snow has a sure hit himself. Now, Psaro is also going to be good against any sort of unit that has courage, so units like Leela, Esther, Elena, just to name a few. Now, some of those units are going to be good against Psaro as well, which we'll talk about, but we'll also just be on the lookout for any sort of unit with bad accuracy and or without a 100% hit. As for who Psaro is going to be weak against, well, it's going to be all of the units with 100% hits. So, for example, Summer Helena is going to be a really tricky unit because she has a 100% hit that decreases evasion rate, but she has a second one that's very strong. Luckily, she has a courage removal that is not 100% hit, so that's good. But we also have to look out for the new Shadow Lynx, as she has a 100% hit, and Pierce is a weakness of Psaro's. And we also have Halloween Lucia, who has a 100% hit. Now, Psaro is going to be interesting against Lucia just because he can break barriers, and maybe that can enable the rest of your fire team, but it's still going to be a tricky matchup. Leela, Joker, and Dark Fina all have good accuracy as well, but they don't have 100% hits. Let's talk some pros, and we're going to start off by talking survivability. And the main thing here is the evasion that Psaro brings. So he has 25% typed magic and missile evasion, which is great, and then a TP buff that gives himself and his allies 25% agility and 25% evasion. So this is a very strong evasion buff. The fact that it gives the agility to himself and allies is very, very strong. It means that your other evasion units could be using other types of buffs, or maybe, you know, whatever tank you're bringing, if it's King Mont, is getting a big ol' agility buff as well. He also has 2 use courage, and while that courage is active, he has some bonuses that we'll talk about later. He also is race ? Which is definitely not human. It means that Man Killer won't be as effective. He can also decrease accuracy with a small damage attack. I don't know, it's weird. It has a 1 distance range, so it's kind of hard for him to use it, but when he does get to use it, it's a chaining skill as well, and it will decrease accuracy. So all of those things will kind of build into him being more survivable. He also has high HP for an evasion unit, so maybe that's going to play into, in a fire team, being able to build up lots of HP and hopefully survive a hit, even if you get hit by a sure hit. Now, Psaro has a lot of power because he can break through barriers, he can ignore courage himself. He also, whenever he evades, gets 20% defense penetration and slash resist penetration. Whenever his courage is active, he has a physical damage boost. It's that same type of damage boost that Hope gives. And he has a 25% slash imperil, which is on an AoE on his sub job. He also has the pierce attack type available to get through some people that have weak pierce resistance. And he has that defense that I talked about, the dark matter. It's a defense break with a non-type, non-elemental attack, and that can really do some damage against the right opponent. I will say that because you're building him for all of this evasion, and you're not going to be able to build up his attack stat nearly as high as some of the other attackers that you see out there, and because of that, he will do a little bit less damage than some of those units, but it's good to see that he has a lot of support in terms of defense and slash resist penetration. There is a trade-off that we have to talk about, though. And then finally, for pros, we have utility. He has a full dispel on his limit burst. He has a bunch of ways to gain AP, and he has a bunch of status effects, although some of them are on some low ranges. So we've got Immobilize, Slow, Blind. Those are all on Samurai. Immobilize is on the Trick Lancer, Slow and Blind are on Samurai sub, and then the decreased healing power that we talked about. He even has a high accuracy attack with a very large modifier for those evasion mirror matches. Just a quick reminder before we hit the cons to hit the like button. It's a really easy thing to do, doesn't cost you anything, and it helps me out. Okay, so the cons. There's a lot of 100% hits in the meta right now. There's a lot of high accuracy units around, so there are certainly, it's not the best evasion meta to be in. However, there's lots of opportunities still when you're targeting people in arena and guild battle, and also in the limited guild battle, evasion becomes a little bit stronger. We do have to watch out for Sephiroth coming down the pipeline because he has 100% hits, but he also has a limit burst, and that limit burst is a 100% hit that also dispels courage, so that counters Psaro pretty hard. He also has lower defense penetration if you want to go for max evasion, so you kind of have to pick, do you want the typed evasion, do you want the Samurai passive ability for evasion, and then there's the Trick Lancer 40% defense penetration. So luckily the VC, the reaction ability, are going to give some defense penetration to Psaro, but really if you want to hit the heights of what he can reach for damage, which I think a lot of people do, then you're going to have to sacrifice a little bit of evasion. He also has some pretty powerful attacks, or some pretty potent attacks in terms of status effects that have very low range. Now, hopefully the evasion means he can approach people to use those, but really it's tricky to get to approach a unit in time on a big map, especially with all these ranged units coming around when you don't have these super long range attacks. He does have some good long range AoEs, but they're not all going to be the skills that you want to use. Some of them just have really low range for the awesome, skills they provide. And then finally, I've already kind of mentioned this, but level 140 and Dream upgrades are just a real long shot at this point. We don't know when those would come, and it means that at some point your Psaro is going to phase out, and you'll look at an example of that with 2B. So we can compare Psaro to the other fire evasion units, and you can see that he does have an increased amount of HP compared to them. His attack stat is kind of in the middle between WOTV, Ildira, and Yuffie, and they're all very mobile units. They all have, decent accuracy, starting accuracy, and then they can go a little bit higher. You can see that Psaro's a little bit slower than Yuffie and Ildira, but he actually has an agility passive that's going to bring him up into that same range as them anyway. So he really is going to end up being about as evasive as they are, and I'll show you exactly what that looks like in just a second here. The big thing that I want to look at here is that you kind of have this spread of resistances where all of them have a major weakness. So in the case of Yuffie, it's magic, and Ildira, it's strike, and with Psaro, it's going to be pierce. Now that actually gets solved a little bit by the raid accessory that we'll see for the Dragon Quest event, but still, they all kind of like match up in the same stat line. What really matters is their kits, and they all bring some pretty unique stuff. It's going to be cool to put them all in a team together. We can also look at Psaro compared to Locke and Elena, and again, very similar units. Locke and Elena are a little bit more evasive than he is. He's got more HP though, and he's able to access a lot more penetrations than Locke is because of these various things that he has, the VC, the equipment, the counter ability, etc. Now Elena is just going to be the champ in terms of damage because she's attacking against Spirit. She's got all these chaining moves. She's got so many ways to boost her magic and then her penetration even further, but when it comes down to it, Psaro has something that these two units don't have, which is that his courage / the re-raise, his courage has two uses, so he's more viable against or across multiple fights, and that's something that you really like to see. Next, we're going to look at the base evasion rates of these units, and the way that I calculated this is by taking the passives of units and not including anything like vision cards or equipment or espers or things like that. So in the case of Elena here, you can see that she has a higher base evasion. And really what that comes down to is that her evasion passive is 15 and the other units usually have an evasion passive of 12. And Elena also on that same passive gets 12% agility. So it really is a nice boost for her evasion. Now, the big thing here with Psaro is that I'm using the Samurai sub to get that 12 extra evasion, and if we took that away, he'd actually be at 60%, which is a lot lower than these other two units. Now he has the typed evasion that the other units might not have. Actually, the first three units here all have typed evasion. We're going to look at that next, but basically you do have to trade off whether Psaro is going to be more of an aggressive attacking unit or if he's going to match up evasion wise with these other units. So when we look at the typed evasion, we can see here that this is where the new units really shine. So Psaro's got the magic missile, we've got the slash missile from Ildira, and then Yuffie has 30% pierce resist or evasion, but a sure hit evasion for 3 turns, which means 100% hit attacks cannot hit you. So that's pretty huge. And then Elena doesn't have any typed evasion at all. All right, some closing thoughts that are very important for Psaro. His equipment is kind of set for him. You kind of have to use the stuff that comes out during this event, which is good and bad. It gives you less flexibility, but the farmable sword for him gives 20% slash attack resist penetration, 15% AP consumption down, and 15% luck. So those are higher than what you're going to get on TMR trust stones. So you definitely want to use that. It gives you the best chance for more evasion. And the raid ribbon that he can equip will give him 20 evasion on the stat line, but then another 15 evasion on the ability, as well as the 5% human resistance. Now, you could use the Santa clothing and you would get 4 more evasion than this ribbon, but then I really do like the fact that it gives you that human resistance. I think that's really nice for when you get hit to have that extra little bit of defense against those types of things. Now, we saw that his vision card is going to have an upgrade to give him more luck, which is the most important evasion stat. So that's going to be a really big help, and I need to see how much luck it is to be able to see, just how more evasive he can become. So his vision card is going to be very important because it also gives bestowed defense penetration, which we were talking about is a bit of a trade-off if you want to go full evade. Now his TMR is pretty interesting as well. It's a piece of clothing that gives haste, and it has the chance of being targeted decreased. However, it only has the one use, which is such a pain. I wish they gave it 2 uses, but it is still still a very good TMR. Any TMR that gives haste is worth looking at, especially when it has a targeted down skill as well. So there's lots of good things that he can equip. The TMR also has agility on it and 15 evasion on it. So it could be something that you use to stack more evasion. At the end of the day, you probably won't want to give him a TMR ability, as his 2 buffs are absolutely crucial for him. So his own TMR to stack lots of evasion, seems pretty good. You're also going to have a bit of leg room to build some of those TMR abilities out with the Trust Stones, because he already has the slash pen, because he already has the luck % up. You can maybe switch those around for some other things that you'd like to see on his kit. All right, it's the end of the video and it's time for the should you pull verdict. And my answer is no. I think that pretty much every player should skip Psaro for the same reason that you should skip Zoma, because these units are just not going to stand the test of time for the most part, especially with the Dream upgrades coming, and fire is a pretty tricky element to use. I think there is a section of people that should pull for him, or could pull for him, sorry, and that would be super dedicated fire players like myself. So I'm definitely going to be pulling for him. But I don't think that non-fire players, stay away. It's a whole investment to get into fire evade. And if you are someone that has fire and you like fire, you could probably just pick up his VC, but not him. But let me make it clear, if you plan to play fire at all as an element, his vision card is an absolute must pull, but Psaro himself is not a must pull. I think anyone that's looking to go for full fire evasion in the future will want to pull for him, but that's not going to be a lot of players, and a lot of players will be skipping him. But I myself will be pulling for him on Wednesday around 7:30 PST, so check that out. That's going to be super fun to be live again with you all. And otherwise, let me know what you thought about the video, if it was useful for you, if you have any feedback of your own for people out there, and I will see you all on Wednesday.